History remembers many queens, but few suffered as cruel a fate as Anne Boleyn. Once the most powerful woman in England, she fell from grace with terrifying speed, condemned to die not by war, but by the very crown that once adored her. This is the chilling story of Anne Boleyn's rise, fall, and execution, and why her death still haunts the legacy of the English throne. If you're drawn to the forgotten corners of history, the dark and the true, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more haunting stories, and let us know in the comments. Do you believe Anne was guilty or framed? Anne Boleyn was born sometime around 1501 into the ambitious Boleyn family. Educated in the Netherlands and France, she returned to England a woman of wit, elegance, and charm, unlike any courtier of her time. Her presence was magnetic. Anne's upbringing in European courts refined her intellect and fashion sense, setting her apart. Her bold personality and quick wit enchanted many, but also provoked suspicion and jealousy. When she returned to England, she entered the court of Queen Catherine of Aragon as a lady-in-waiting. But her destiny lay far beyond serving another queen. It wasn't long before she caught the eye of King Henry VIII. But Anne was no ordinary mistress. She refused to be used and discarded. Instead, she demanded more, not just affection, but a crown. And Henry, intoxicated by her, gave up everything to give her that. He defied the Catholic Church. He broke from Rome. He started the English Reformation, all to marry Anne Boleyn. Their wedding in 1533 crowned Anne as Queen of England. And later that year, she gave birth, not to the longed-for male heir, but to a daughter, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's birth was a disappointment to Henry and the court, but Anne remained hopeful. She had suffered a long journey to the throne, and she believed in her destiny. Yet behind the scenes, whispers began. Henry's frustration grew, and Anne's enemies, many still loyal to Catherine of Aragon, quietly plotted her downfall. This disappointment, combined with Anne's growing number of enemies at court, began to chip away at her position. But Anne wasn't just a wife. She was a political force. She supported Protestant reforms, influenced royal appointments, and helped steer the ideological direction of a nation. Still, she walked a dangerous tightrope, surrounded by rivals who resented her rise and questioned her influence. Even among her allies, Anne's temperament was controversial. She was passionate, outspoken, and unapologetically ambitious, traits that made her a powerful player, but also made powerful enemies. And then came the turning point, a series of miscarriages and Henry's growing frustration. His gaze began to shift toward a lady-in-waiting named Jane Seymour. Anne's enemies saw their moment. In 1536, she was arrested, charged with adultery, incest, and treason. The crimes were shocking, the evidence thin. Her alleged lovers, including her own brother George Boleyn, were interrogated and executed. But it was clear, this was not justice. This was elimination. Anne was taken to the Tower of London. There in her chambers she awaited her fate, praying, writing, and maintaining her innocence to the very end. She was to be executed by a French swordsman, brought specially to ensure a swift death. Yet even in the days before her execution, Anne maintained grace and composure. She prepared herself for the horror that was to come. It was the morning of May 19, 1536. The Tower Green was still, the sky overcast, the crowd hushed in reverent anticipation. Anne Boleyn, once Queen of England, stepped out dressed in a sober gray gown, her dark eyes unwavering, her spine straight. She was escorted from her quarters to the scaffold, a wooden platform built for the spectacle of death. Awaiting her were her ladies-in-waiting, silent and weeping, and a crowd of courtiers, guards, and commoners drawn by morbid curiosity. She gave a short speech, remarkable for its calm and composure. She praised the king, asking God to protect him, and asked the crowd to pray for her soul. Her final words struck all who listened. "I am come hither to die, as I am sentenced by the law. I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you." There was no bitterness, no plea for mercy, only grace in the face of injustice. The executioner, brought in from France for his skill, approached quietly, He had hidden his sword in the straw to make the execution swift and unexpected. Anne removed her headdress and tucked her hair beneath a linen cap. She knelt. A lady-in-waiting blindfolded her. Her lips moved in silent prayer. The swordsman called to his assistant to fetch his sword, a distraction, so Anne would lift her head naturally, and then silence. With a single swift motion, the blade fell. Anne Boleyn was dead, but the horror did not end with the blade. Her severed head, with eyes said to still flicker in shock, was placed beside her body. There was no coffin, no royal ceremony. Her remains were hastily gathered and placed in an old elm arrow chest, too small for her body, and buried beneath the floor of the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. It was a burial unfit for a queen. Even those who had turned against her reportedly felt unease. Anne's death was not only tragic, it was a cold, calculated statement, a warning to all who dared defy the throne. Anne Boleyn was gone, erased from the court, forgotten by the man who once tore a kingdom apart to marry her. But her story was far from over. Just 11 days after her execution, Henry VIII married Jane Seymour. The speed was shocking even to his closest advisors. Jane would bear Henry the long-awaited male heir, Edward VI, but she would die soon after childbirth. The throne remained unstable, but the child Anne left behind, Elizabeth, would grow up in the shadows. Declared illegitimate, shuffled between households, and often forgotten by her father, Elizabeth's future seemed uncertain. And yet, it was Anne's blood that would one day rule England again. Elizabeth I would rise from the ashes of her mother's disgrace to become one of the greatest monarchs in English history. Under her reign, England saw a golden age of exploration, culture, and power. She remained unmarried, childless, and independent, earning the title, the Virgin Queen. Anne's legacy lived on through her daughter. In Elizabeth, people saw Anne's intelligence, her wit, her resolve. The execution that was meant to destroy her bloodline instead immortalized it. Anne became a martyr of courtly politics, a symbol of female ambition crushed by a patriarchal system. Over the centuries, historians re-examined her trial. The evidence against her was weak, the motivations of her accusers blatantly political. She was a woman who dared to want more in a world that punished women for such ambition. Her death was not justice, it was convenience. Today, her grave in the Tower of London is visited by thousands. Flowers are placed in her memory. Her story is retold in books, films, and documentaries. She has become a figure of tragic empowerment, a reminder of how history treats women who refuse to stay silent. And her ghost, some say, still walks the tower, restless, proud, unbowed. If this story shook you, if Anne's courage, betrayal, and legacy moved you, then please like this video, subscribe for more haunting tales from history, and comment below. Do you think Anne was innocent or guilty of defying the wrong king? Because history isn't just about what we remember, it's about what we refuse to forget. Behind every crown lies a shadow.